Welcome, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of AZ Security. Today, I have a special guest, and that is Merill Fernando. Welcome.
Hey, Dinant, I'm super excited to be here.
And we're going to touch upon the zero trust assessments. Merill, for everybody who is new on this topic, can you explain what it
Yeah.
is?
Yes, yeah. So the story goes about SFI. I don't know if your audience would have heard about SFI. So it's a Microsoft initiative called the Secure Future Initiative, and it's all about securing Microsoft. And there's a lot of guidance that Microsoft has been sharing about what Microsoft was doing to secure our own tenant, the Microsoft corporate tenant and our engineering systems and, all of the systems at Microsoft. And there were a lot of asks from customers going like, how can you're doing all these things, and Microsoft every quarterly, Charlie Bell, old VP, used to give updates about Microsoft's progress, right? Like, and some of the things were visible, example like enforcing MFA for Azure access were some of the visible things they did, but there were a lot of things they were doing internally, right? Getting rid of any app that had secrets, they were moving to managed identity and things like that. So there's a lot of internal things, but lots of customers kept asking us, it's good to see, Microsoft, you're doing all these things, but what can we do in our own tenants? Because, we also run Entra, we also use Intune, we use Purview. And how do we make sure that, we are also securing our own things the same way?
Yeah.
So that was how it started. So we have on Microsoft Learn, and we'll share the links. If you go to ak.ms/entra/security, there is a whole bunch of guidance there that talks about what you need to do to secure your Entra tenant. And some of these are just Entra settings, but some are practices you should do, right? Like, don't use app secrets, don't use certificates, use managed identity. And if you do use certificates, they should expire in 6 months, not a 10-year certificate. And so they are not just settings that you just go and turn on and off, but some are best practices for your tenant, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot in there. And if you see the Entra one, the page will just keep scrolling and scrolling. There are, I think, about 150, 170 odd different things to go look at. And when you go look at one thing, it will say, go look in all your service principles and see
Yeah.
if you're using reply URLs which are pointing to invalid domains, right? Now that's a big task. Like one line item will be something that might take, weeks for you to go, or even months to actually go and clean up and have a healthy tenant. So that's all guidance, and it's a lot of work to go and check each one and then go and check your tenant. So the assessment is sort of a helper that we created that will take what we published as guidance in the Learn Docs and actually go into your tenant and perform those checks in an automated way, and then give you a report saying, oh, you passed all this and you have this number of things that you failed, meaning we found issues, and you might need to go look at it. And, there are steps to what you need to do to fix. So in a nutshell, that's what the assessment is all about. There are lots of pillars in Zero Trust. We last year, at the end of last year in December, we launched with identity and devices, basically Entra and Intune. And then last quarter, we launched the two more pillars, networks, and we launched data. That means network would be global secure access and Azure networking. And the data pillar is mostly like Purview and configuring, DLP and all those various things to secure. So there are a few more pillars that are going to come. But right now, as it stands, the assessment does these 4 pillars.
Nice. I think that will cover almost everything, right? Especially, as you mentioned, the identity, your devices, networking, but also your data, which is very important nowadays.
Yes,
Um,
yeah. Well, a lot of things. Some things people are excited about for the next quarter, and we're sort of revealing what we are going to do here in this podcast. So we are planning to include AI, the AI pillar. So how do you configure Copilot, Azure Foundry? How do you make sure that it's set up the right way? Or do you have agents that are configured that are not being set up correctly? So it'll go do those assessments. So the AI pillar is a new one that we will be planning on launching by end of June next quarter. And
Okay.
then we'll also be doing like SecOps and how do you do secure DevOps and all those things. So there are a few pillars planned. The AI one is sort of the big one that's planned for next quarter.
Awesome. I also had another podcast earlier with Evelina, which we touched upon all the AI security settings.
Yes.
Completely over the whole ecosystem of Microsoft products. And you're seeing a little bit of struggling. And I'm very happy that this pillar will also come so that you have one place to see what your status is, which things you have to reconsider maybe, or just take actions on that.
Absolutely, yeah. So Evelyn actually helped me with the Purview pillar data when we were building it. She tested it out and gave a lot of feedback. So she's
Cool.
been a great partner. A lot of the MVPs have been really great partners in helping us Zero Trust, bring it out, because it's a community effort as well.
I agree. I was on the MVP Summit a few weeks ago, and it was so good vibe, and we could deliver so many feedback back live to the product teams.
Nice.
And that's a very helpful way to help each other, basically.
Yes, yeah. So this project is completely open source. We publish everything. It's the MIT license, and we release all of the code out in the public so people can go, and there have been lots of PRs we've received from people who tested, and they've given us fixes. People contribute by saying, I tested in my tenant and I think this thing is wrong. We are looking for a lot of feedback as well. So there are lots of different types of tenants, right? So these things really help.
Yeah.
It's a community effort. Overall, it's not like a formal product offering from Microsoft, something you pay for a service. It's a community tool that we built and shared with everyone.
Awesome. If I'm going to use this tool, do I need specific licenses requirements from Intune in this perspective and Entra?
Yeah, so that's a neat thing, right? So I've shared the ak.ms links, and if you see, even for the recommendations that we provide without even the assessment tool, we call out for every test whether that particular test requires some license. So some of them, if it's a test that is looking at your conditional access policy, then you obviously need to have P1 for it. So there are those requirements. But outside of that, the tool itself is free. There is no license. You can install the PowerShell module and run it. And it's MIT license, so you can take it and run it internally. You can make changes and use that in that way as well. But there are different tests that depend on different licenses. So we didn't want to make it a tool for to sell Microsoft features. So if you are not licensed for a feature, we don't even show the recommendation.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So if you don't have P2, we don't show it, but there's a toggle. If you are interested, you can go turn it on or click on it. What we do is we just skip those tests. So you'll see them come up, but they'll be skipped. And only when you click on it, we tell you you don't have the license. So this test doesn't mean anything. So let's say if you don't have P2 or E5, then we don't tell you, oh, you're not using PIM, or PIM is not configured correctly and things like that, because you are not licensed for it in the first place.
Yeah, it's not pushing, right? Like that.
Exactly. Yeah. We didn't want to make this something that tries to upsell and move you. Those are there for you to see and learn more about those. But we didn't want to give you a lower score just because you're not licensed for a feature. Right. So we were very conscious about that.
Cool. I can't wait to see. Do you have maybe a demo to show us how the tool is looking?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So let me open up a screen share. Awesome. Yeah. So if you go to ak.ms/zero trust assessment/demo, so we made a ready-made report of, when you run it, what is the final report that you see. So in the assessment, it'll take time. So one of the key things to remember is it's a PowerShell module. you say install a PowerShell, install Zero Trust Assessment, then you need to sign in to connect, and then you say invoke assessment, and then it'll just keep running for a while. We've had customers who have like very large, where it's taken 24 hours with,
It's good to know.
yeah. So, but I mean, those are extreme. For example, they have like 1 million users in their tenant, right? So not everyone has
It'll
1
take a
million
while.
users in their tenant. Yeah. So it should, depending on the size, it varies a lot. Like my very small demo tenant takes about 5 minutes, but it can take anywhere from 1 hour, 2 hours, because what we do is we do a very intensive deep dive into everything in the tenant. So when it runs, we give a high level overview of, some of the information you already know, like how many users, groups, etc. you have. But even this, I've seen some people were surprised, going like, oh, I didn't know I had so many guests in my tenant, right? Because by default it's on and people are inviting guests, and they didn't even configure it, but they see suddenly, oh, something that they didn't know. Then we have some interesting ones. So what we did here is we went through the data and tried to show it in a different way. And the whole thing here is, if you see more green, then you have a more healthier tenant. So what we're trying to say is, like, how many of your users, privileged users, this is people who have, Entra roles like global admin and application admin, etc. How many of them are signing in, or how many of them have registered what type of authentication method? So we can see in this tenant, there are some users who don't have any MFA setup. Some have, but it's a small number. Some have phone and authenticator setup, and then they have that most have phone and authenticator, but some have passkeys and phishing resistant. So in this, what we ideally want to see is completely phishing resistant, right? If you're a privileged user, you should be able to enforce saying you should only use FIDO2 keys, be very
Exactly.
secure.
The FIDO
Yeah.
keys.
So
Yes.
yeah, so this is a way to, like, using this, you get a really quick insight into how your privileged users are set up. This part of it is an interesting one. This one, we looked at what they have registered, not actually what they use. In the second one, we look at, just all the users in the tenant. We look at the sign-in logs and say, okay, over the last 30 days, this many people, you had CA applied for MFA, and it's looking good. But there were some people who had no CA applied. For some reason, you have created exclusions, and they are going in without any MFA being applied into their logins, or even any conditional access. So that highlights some problem with how your CA. So this is looking at the sign-in logs to give you some insights, because you could have any config, but then what actually happens is the reality, right? So it's an interesting view. If you have, in this one, you can also see some of those users, they have no MFA. So there is a CA policy that is being applied, but it's not an MFA policy. Maybe it's doing some other check, but for some reason, they're not applying MFA for this group of users. So these are sort of interesting insights we are trying to give about how well your tenant is set up for zero trust. Right.
Cool.
So similarly with, that earlier one was privileged users. This is all of the users, right? So including non-privileged users. And it shows how healthy or not healthy, what sort of auth methods they're using, and what devices they're coming from. This is based on the sign-in logs, whether they're coming from compliant or non-compliant things. So it's just ways to give you a different view into your tenant. And this is mostly summary information about how many devices we are seeing. And this is a cool one. I really like this one because it wasn't something that you see in any of even the internal dashboards, is how many users are having Entra joined devices versus registered and hybrid joined, and how many of those are compliant or not. So it, like, very quickly, it gives you a good view of how the tenant is set up from a device perspective, and how the compliance is. So yeah, very, very neat view into your tenant, right? Insights into your tenant in this. And it's a mix of sign-in logs and the configuration. Then we come to the most interesting part, which is the actual assessment. So as I told you, even in this report, you can click through the docs and you can see, right? There are so many different checks, and we have the license, what is needed for each check. And for each one of these, we can click through, right? And say, okay, can guests invite other guests? By default, they can invite. So it's something you want to turn off. And we tell, what the reason is behind that. And when you want to remediate it, to fix it, if you click on this, we take you to the actual docs page. And even in the docs page, you can see it takes you to the very specific part of the doc telling, okay, this is what you really need to do to configure the guest invite settings. And you can see it says that the part where guests can invite another guest is turned off. You're switching to the second one, right? So it's a lot of work we did with the docs team as well to make
Yeah,
sure
I
that
can
all of
imagine.
these, because it flows through into the Microsoft Docs and they're all holistic, right? It's not just some recommendations and then you have to figure out on your own how to go and correct
And
these things.
will it also be maintained when docs are updated, or is it just reactive? Like
Yeah.
it's now a control, and if the docs are updated, it
Yeah.
can be in the future that the link will not work anymore.
Right. No, yeah. So this is the docs team is part of the zero trust assessment. So this
Okay.
is one of the new things we did. They're
Mhm.
embedded in the assessment. They're the people who write the even the titles. So all these things you see, the
Yeah.
titles of every test, they actually come from the doc. So our build process for the module, it goes to the docs and it actually reads from the GitHub repo. If you go into the GitHub repo of the docs, you'll see there's a unique number we have for each test.
Okay.
There's a markdown file. We actually read the title and the content from there. And the same content shows up in the test, in the assessment report as well. So say you run this and you get this report. When you click on it, you'll see some content here about what was checked. This is
Mhm.
actually stuff that's from the Microsoft Learn docs. So every
Right.
time we build a new version, it goes and pulls the doc and it embeds this. So what was checked and the remediation, they all come from the same place, from the same team,
Okay.
right? So
And
yeah,
when, for instance, I fixed the issue,
yeah,
suppose I've used the recommendation action,
yeah,
I will rerun it again. How long does it take? Yeah,
yeah.
of course, it's the same time, right? He has to re-investigate all the security topics again.
Correct. Yeah. It you can run individual tests if you want. So there's a test ID for each test. So you can pick and run each test. So if you see here, there are all these columns. So if you turn on ID, every test has an ID. So when you say invoke assessment, if you want, you can only run that one test, and then it will go and run. But if it's a test that depends on a lot of data, like service principals or apps, they're the ones that take a long time to download. So if you have tests that are relying on some of those big data sets, then yes, it's going to take a lot of time to run all of that and get it back, even if it's for one test.
And if I'm looking to automation, and for instance, I
Yeah,
want to recreate this assessment bi-weekly
yeah,
or maybe bi-monthly, hand it over to our CISO or other security related people
yeah,
who are responsible for the environment. Is that
yeah.
possible that I can make a pipeline around it, automate it, so to speak?
Ye- Yes, yeah. So we do provide the option. It's all just standard PowerShell, right? So we haven't explicitly given guidance on how to do it. But end of the day, if you go and look at the source code, right? If you go into GitHub, all of the source is there. And if you see the connect part of it, so if
Mhm.
I just dig into the code a little bit to show what we have there. So if you go into connect ZT assessment, there's a shortcut method we provide called connect assessment, and then you can say what tenant and what client ID and certificate. So you
Right.
can pass all that information, and it will then run in that way as well. So you can use a service principal, etc., to automate and run it. But at the end of the day, it's actually, if you go into the code, it's actually calling connect mg graph.
Ah,
So you could, whatever you can do with ConnectMG Graph, you can do it here. But we
Right.
have not explicitly tested all the tests, right? Because there are some APIs which might be only delegate only, and they might not support service principals. So a good example is in the data pillar. There are a lot of tests that rely on SharePoint Online, right?
Okay.
And or AIP, the old legacy Azure Information Protection, and they don't support service principals. So those tests, what we do is we just skip them. Like you'll see a status saying skipped, and the status will show us skipped there for you. So that's the only thing that you need to be aware of. Some things will not run when you do it.
All right. Well, this gives an amazing overview. I think a lot of customers are very happy to have a verifying tool where they stand in their tenant. And as AI is coming with all the different kind of AI agents in the ecosystem, which will be announced soon, it's very powerful. Gives I'm seeing also the use case, as I mentioned, for security people who just want to see a glance, like where are we currently, and how compliant are we on the security level, but also on the best practices perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And this creates a JSON file. So if you want, you can use an AI to interrogate that file. So it's not just HTML. In the folder it generates, we have a whole JSON file. So you can use an agent to talk to that and, carry on conversations. It does a lot of intensive things. Like there are some things where it goes into every service principal, every reply URL, and then does tests on each one. It does like 5 tests. Like, is the domain still there, or is the domain not even resolving? Like, is it not in DNS? Because that means someone can do a hijack, right, by registering the domain and then getting a reply URL and doing stuff. So uh, for every reply URL, we do like 5 tests. So those are the things that actually end up taking a lot of time because we need to spin up and do these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the some of the like the interesting parts of those.
Yeah, I can't wait till that AI is being added as well. In June, you mentioned, right?
Yes, yeah, very
That's coming
soon.
soon.
Yeah, the AI pillar is an interesting one. Yeah. So for customers who deploy Copilot, Azure AI Foundry, it will go and check things like, is agent ID being used? Because in some of those platforms, agent ID is an opt-in, right? So there are practices that you should follow to make sure you are doing it securely. So those are some key things to keep in mind.
Cool. If I'm new to this topic, where to get started, so to speak?
Yes, yeah. So I want to also call out that we also released a workshop with the assessment. So I know this was about the assessment. Maybe I should share my screen quickly to walk people through that. So we provide the assessment, but we also provide this thing called the workshop. So what we do there is you can use this tool to go through, and not everything can be in the tests, right? There are things like, do you have a practice for making sure that the security team is reviewing risks that are called out? Like, it's not a test that you can call some API and check. That's a practice that you have for zero trust. So we have this workshop that customers can do as a self-service, or they can get a SME to walk them through, where we have one for each pillar. It includes the AI pillar as well. And what you do there during the workshop is someone will walk you through, some SME who knows the topic will walk your customer or you through, and they'll go through and say, okay, what is your CA posture? Is it locked down? Have you documented it? And you can say, oh, we are in progress in doing that. And then you can set each of the things that you're doing against the best practices. So these are some of the things we do with all of our customers. So we look at, are you using password hash sync? So they might say, oh yeah, we have done it. So that would be marked as completed, and you can see it's green. So the workshop is a really good way to go through and fill this. Fill out all of this, and at the end you get like a good roadmap for your tenant about, okay, these are areas, gaps in my tenant that I should think of fixing and addressing. So the workshop is very useful to do this. So they are both complementary, the zero trust assessment and the workshop. They go together. And on this page, you can see we walk through, what those two things are. You have the workshop as a planning tool, and then the assessment to run the assessment. So those two together, they give you what you will get. So if I want to leave anyone with thoughts, is that do both these things. Usually these workshops, we run it for some of our customers, and our partners, Microsoft partners, security partners also will run it for you. You can reach out to Dinant as well if you want someone to run this for yourself. And this will help you, right? And these workshops usually are 2-hour long workshops, because you can't really quickly go through them, because some of them you need to know what that feature is all about. And we provide a lot of documentation as well. So for people who are a little bit of SMEs, they can use that. But if not, they can click through, read about what it is, the explanation is, and then do a self-assessment of what you're doing. You can also say, oh, for this particular thing, maybe it's about IGA governance. You might say, oh, we are using a third-party product, right? So you can mark it as third-party and then save that. So then you say, okay, we are not using a Microsoft product for this. It's a third-party, but we just want to make sure you are covering all your bases when it comes to zero trust, right? Because zero trust is not like one product or one feature that you enabled or you deploy and then you have zero trust done. It's a thing that goes across multiple pillars.
I agree. You have a choice, right? With workshop, you can at least see your gaps in your current environment and take off from there, as you mentioned, in a roadmap, in timelines, whatever fits for the customer. And with assessment, it's a real verify, like, this is my environment currently.
Yep.
And let's make a plan, or just fix low-hanging fruit and then continue the hot topics from there.
Exactly.
Cool. Amazing story. I can't wait to see the fulfillments of the other pillars as well. Merill, thank you very much for your time. Also for your explanation. I hope for everybody at home, as Merill mentioned, go to the possibilities which is shown and look for yourself. And hopefully this will help you in your zero trust journey, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Thank you once again. Maybe I can invite you back when other pillars are added.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on to share with your audience about the Zero Trust workshop and assessment. I don't think we actually come out and shared and maybe shown a demo to anyone, so this might be the first time we have it publicly. So
cool.
It's good to share it here, and I'll now have a reference to send people to when someone asks about the workshop and the assessment.
Definitely. Let's round up for today. Thank you very much. And for everybody at home, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And till next time, take care.
Cheers.
Bye.